Welcome to the Old Time Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Old Time Boxing Show is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Make sure you hit up Alex Ramos on Facebook or the Retired Boxers Foundation on Facebook for all the information you need with those guys. They do some great work for former retired boxers. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now I want to welcome in the resident boxing historian for the Grueling Truth, Christopher Shelton. How you doing, Chris?
Good. It should be a really interesting show.
Most definitely. In our show today, we're going to talk about the 1980 Olympic boycott, the 1980 Olympic boxing team, how it affected them, and just basically do a little overview of it. And we're going to start off with something I know me and Chris disagree with, and that's the 1980 Olympic boycott. Jimmy Carter was eager to boycott the Moscow Summer Olympics in response to the Soviet-Russian invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. He even went so far as to enlist former boxer Muhammad Ali as an emissary to African nations to try to elicit the support for a boycott from them also. Do you think the boycott was a good idea?
Well, I think at least Carter did the appropriate thing in that he didn't just arbitrarily do it by himself. He ran it both through the House of Representatives and the Senate, and both overwhelmingly bipartisan agreed to go through with this boycott. And I think it really stung the Soviet Union to do this to them. I think when the Soviet Union decided to do it back in '84, America didn't really care. If you don't want to come, don't come. But here the Soviet Union was going to glamorize, which is not really one nation. It's one nation capturing a bunch of other nations and holding them prisoner. And I think that if it didn't hurt Russia, I would think it is a tragedy for the athletes. But I think that Carter did what he thought was. I don't think what he did was politics only. I think he did what was in his heart, and he ran it through both parties. And that's the system. The Olympic Games are more than just about America or any other country pounding down on other countries. It's supposed to be about civility. And in the midst of an invasion, that's a pretty bad 2 weeks.
1936, the U.S. still went to Hitler's Germany.
And there's people that wonder whether that was a good idea or whether it affected a lot of questions.
How could it not be a good idea? Do you think it was a bad idea for Jesse Owens and all the other black Americans to go over there and stomp Hitler's ass?
Yeah, but a couple Jewish athletes weren't able to participate and such, and I think America would not have been in the wrong had they decided not to go over there, or any country that wanted to boycott it. I think that would be a good time.
The ability to go over and establish your dominance over somebody is a good thing?
Well, I think maybe Jesse Owens himself, helped get rid of some of the white race Aryan theories of Hitler. But that is a good example of every Olympics has something going on. Do you boycott every Olympics? And that I don't think so. But I think that's one of the Olympics that if it stood out of one that you might want to think about boycotting, that would have been a good one. Though we showed up and the war happened anyway, but it would have happened whether we boycotted it or didn't boycott it.
Exactly. So what was the use of it? It didn't stop the war. It didn't help to end the war. The war didn't end until 1989.
You mean the Afghanistan situation?
Yeah.
Well, no, but I think in that case, as I said, I think that Russia was going to glamorize this whole bloc, and that this glamorize their communism, and what they're doing is they're holding people prisoner. This isn't socialism under Marx. This is capturing many nations and not allowing people to be free. And again, it's not so much that Carter did the right thing as that he did not do this for some political edge. He did it because he thought it was the right thing to do. He's the president of the United States, and he ran it through the House, he ran it through the Senate, and both parties agreed to it. So I think if he arbitrarily did it by himself, and either party really rebelled against him, then I think there's more of a problem. But at least I think he found due process, and I do think it hurt the Soviet Union. They were really pissed off.
How did it hurt them?
Well, because they couldn't glamour. They had this whole stadiums built and set up so that they could have 2 weeks of showing what a wonderful life it was in the Soviet Union. While plenty of people come back from Russia, people like Walter Cronkite, and say it's awful over there. You can't get food. People are starving. It's a horrible situation, and why glamorize something that doesn't deserve to be glamorized?
But we go to China for Olympics.
Yeah, well, I will say this. I mean, here we are in a situation with North Korea, threatening to kill various people. But at least for those 2 weeks, the Winter Olympics of this past, North and South Korea flew under one flag. For 2 weeks they had peace, and that might be something, if nothing else. As you said, we had the Vietnam conflict. Other countries could have or could not have boycotted, but at least put aside war for 2 weeks, in the spirit of the games, or do something that's more of a gesture. As I said, Carter did what he felt was in his heart, and that's what the man does. He's a principled man. Doesn't make him always right. I mean, I think sometimes Jimmy Carter is a principled man who does something that I think he's just kooky or wrong, and this might be one of them. But I do think it was a principled decision, and I know it hurt the Soviet Union because of how pissed off they were, and that when they boycotted our Olympics, I was there in LA in '84. We could care less. So what? Don't come.
Yeah, I just don't understand this. I mean, there was still Olympics held when the U.S. was, invading Vietnam.
Oh, sure. I mean, in '68, not only are we in the midst of the Vietnam situation, but in Mexico City itself, a lot of students were murdered and trampled and disappeared and all sorts of things that we could have walked out. Yeah. Exactly. I'm saying that if somebody feels it's a principled decision to do something because of something like that, or the '72 Olympics, where in the midst of it, these Israeli athletes are captured and murdered, and the Israeli athletes went home. I think as long as it's a principled decision, it's hard to say that it's the wrong decision. And as I said, the only thing.
Let me ask you this: in 1980, in the Winter Olympics in February of that year, the United States Olympic hockey team beat the Russians. I think that probably upset them more than us boycotting their Olympics.
Well, I don't think that's probably true, but I think.
You don't.
But
you don't think they had a problem with that, huh?
Oh no, I think they had a problem with it, but I think they losing the entire Olympics and the entire, I don't remember whose money it was. Probably ABC's
Olympics.
Money.
They still have.
No, I mean they lost our coverage of it, or us paying attention to it, or us giving them money, our television money over it, and giving them all this prestige that they thought they were trying to infiltrate our West, like they still are, and we burned them on it. And as I said, I think I just believe it hurt them more. As far as the hockey team, of course they were probably upset, but that's a game. It's just a game. For us, it was a very spirited kind of thing to win.
I think that was more than a game for them. That was their way of life against ours. That's what those competitions were about back then.
Well, I mean, you'd argue that the '72 basketball game where it seemed like they sort of cheated to win the gold over our team, that's life or death. It's not life or death.
No,
it's
because
just
we are a free country. They're a communist country.
Right.
Their athletes were raised from birth to do that. And the thing is this, if you go over there to their country and dominate them, that seems like it would kind of, not make their society look that great. And the other thing is this, I don't think Jimmy Carter had a principled anything. He's a politician. I mean, he was backed by Brzezinski, who was the one that pushed him to go to the boycott. And Brzezinski is one of the biggest globalists you'll ever find. And if you look at countries like Britain, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was unwilling to go. She said that it was useless to do that, and she did not want to take away from her athletes that had worked their entire lives for this. Because in the end, she said that it would do nothing to end the war.
But England and Italy both supported the American boycott. They just sent their athletes at the same time.
If they supported the boycott, why would they send their athletes?
Well, I think because of the same things that you're sort of saying, that they understand why he's doing it, but they think ultimately in their case it's not worth it to their athletes to do this. I mean, I feel bad for the other countries who I feel kind of worried. I mean, I feel bad for our American athletes, especially watching these boxers. But these other countries that supported our boycott, countries like let's see, West Germany, South Korea, Canada, Chile, some other Latin American countries. I feel bad for them because they would have gone if not for Jimmy Carter and our House in our Senate. So their athletes are stuck by another country's decision, and I feel almost worse for them. But at the same time, they did back it up. They said we support the boycott and we won't send our athletes, while England and Italy said we support the boycott, but we're still sending our athletes. We don't think this is the way to respond to the invasion, which is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the other countries didn't support us because a lot of them went. And the thing
well,
is...
certainly all the Soviet-owned countries went because they didn't have a choice.
Well, no, I'm talking about England, Italy. I mean, a lot of these countries went.
But England and Italy supported the boycott. They just sent their athletes.
Okay,
while
how
other
do
countries
you support a boycott if you're sending your athletes?
Because you're saying that we understand that you're doing something that you believe is the principal thing to do, but we don't agree that this is the right way to do it. We agree that there should be something done with regards to Russia invading Afghanistan, and there should be something that you do to boycott it. This isn't the right way to do it, but we understand that you feel different, and that's what you're going to do. And our alliance with you isn't hurt at all. You know, we're totally fine that you don't want to go, but we're still going to send our athletes.
But the problem is Afghanistan still sent athletes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's that's one of the quirkier, crazier things. But you're right. Afghanistan did send its athletes. All I'm saying is every country had to make its decisions, and that Carter didn't do it arbitrarily. He did run it, through due process. And you can, even if you disagree with what he did. I disagree. I mean, I agree that he's a politician. I'm not saying this man's Gandhi or something. He's a politician. But I do believe he thought that this is the right way to do something, and I certainly know that the Soviet Union was Russia, let's put it that way, really, really, really unbelievably pissed off that we did this, and then took their revenge, and then their revenge meant nothing. So it was kind of a laugh that after 80 and 84, except for the hurt to the 80 athletes, that look, we don't care if you come to our Olympics or not, but you really care when we go to yours. So we hurt you, but you didn't hurt us. We made a lot of money. The '84 Olympics under Uberov, we made a fortune. We don't need Russia, and I feel bad for their countries, the countries around them that they're controlling, because they had to boycott against their will. They would have been glad to come.
We boycotted against our will too. We were forced.
Well, no,
yeah,
Germany didn't. Germany could have gone.
The freedom for our athletes to go was taken away. That's what a communist country does. I mean, he could have said that we're not going to support the U.S. Olympic team going over there, but he could have left them with their passports, and they could have got there themselves and competed if this was a free country.
Well, it's actually it's an interesting idea that only because Russia was banned from these latest Winter Olympics, that the athletes were allowed to go, but they weren't allowed to do it under the Russian flag. I don't even think Carter or America or anybody processed the idea of the athletes could possibly go, but not under the American flag, and whether the American athletes, how they respond to that, because I don't think anybody ever thought of that until this Russian ban.
I think he did, because he said that if any athletes tried to do that they would not be allowed to have passports.
Well, I can't say that I remember that or that is the case.
You don't have to remember it. Just look it up online. I mean, I'm sitting here reading it.
Right. Well, all I know is that he did what he thought was principled. He ran it through due process, and if you disagree with his decision, lots of people probably did, and some countries flat out disagreed and sent their athletes anyway. Some agreed and sent their athletes, and some agreed and didn't send their athletes, and everybody made their decisions. I do think it hurt Russia, and that the Olympics is not about countries stomping on other countries. It's supposed to be about bringing people together. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of why it was set up an Olympian 3,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago.
That's bullshit.
It was
to
to
give
try
gold
to
medals to the winner.
no, they're trying to
They
alleviate
give
war.
gold medals to the winner.
No, I know a lot about that period.
There's nothing about the Olympics that's trying to alleviate war because our country is in a perpetual state of war. I mean,
but
we invaded in 1990 the Persian Gulf. I mean,
no,
we
I'm
invaded Afghanistan in 2001. We
that
invaded Iraq in 2003. We did the same thing they do.
The Olympia set up 3,000 years ago and ran for about 1,000 years, was set up to try to find a way for countries to engage in a way that was non-warlike for a short time, knowing that all these villages are warring anyway. They had war and still sent athletes, but the whole point was for at least a couple of weeks, or at least for a short time. The Olympics weren't 2 weeks, two weeks.
Yeah. So what the
3,000
U.S.
years
did
ago.
with Carter and the boycott is they went against the Olympic ideals.
Well, the Russia didn't offer enough of a leaf of, well, what are you going to do if we do send our athletes? What's going to happen for 2 weeks? And whatever they did, they didn't offer enough for Carter's taste. And Carter's, he's a person that's pretty stubborn about doing certain things, and that's part of his persona. He was elected by the people, and then he was voted out of office by the same people.
Yeah. My point is this. Pretty much everything he did for 4 years was a mistake. I still don't see how you could say that this was the right thing to do if it had no effect on the war.
I think it was a principled thing to do, and let's face it, within 10 years, the Soviet Union's gone. I mean, the East Berlin, the wall's gone.
Yeah, but that was more from Reagan and the jacking up the defense there. The Russians had to keep up with it, and the Russians folded. It had nothing to do with the 1980 Olympics.
Well, like I said, I'm not saying Carter did the right thing. I said what I thought he did was principled, and then he ran it through due process. And I think that it hurt the Soviet Union more when we didn't show up in '80. And I know people didn't care. People could care less that they didn't show up in '84.
Well,
but I feel sorry for their athletes that, not the athletes that they surround, Romania, Poland, all those other countries that they control, and Ukraine, Georgia, and they don't have any choice about anything, and they're held under a dictatorship from another country.
Yeah, but we still go to Olympics with those dictatorships.
Right. The Olympic athletes, I feel very bad for them, but at the end of the day, they had more freedom the day after the '80 Olympics ended than any of those athletes that were in those Russian Soviet bloc countries.
Who had more freedom? The American athletes?
Yes. They had more freedom of what they could do with their lives.
Taken away from them.
No, not necessarily.
No, not necessarily. Hold on a second. Wait a second.
Sure.
I've talked to a lot of these guys, and almost none of these guys got anything up front when they turned pro. And the other thing is this. If you look at them, guys like Johnny Bumpus,
right.
a lot of them were asked by the United States Olympic team in 1977-78 to stick around for the '80 Olympics. And they stuck around for that. They fought so much amateur-wise. That's why when you look at this '80 Olympic team, a lot of these guys were burnt out by the time they turned pro. I mean, you can't tell me that if Donald Curry comes in and beats, Aldama and John Mugabe in the Olympics on, national TV, that he's not going to make $1 million coming out of there. He's going to get better management. He's going to get better everything. The same thing with Johnny Bumpus or Robert Shannon or Richie Sandoval. Richie Sandoval, I've talked to him before, and he said when he turned pro, he was using the same trunks that he used, that his mom had made him, and everything was the same. Nothing had happened because he wasn't in that Olympics. So to say that didn't cost these guys a ton of money and a leg up to start their career is nuts. I mean, if you look at Leon Spinks in 1976, if there was a boycott for some reason of Canada and there was no 76 Olympics, there is no way in hell he's fighting Muhammad Ali after 8 fights in 1978 for the heavyweight title.
Right, you misunderstood what I said, and I'm sorry. I didn't want to step over you. I didn't imply they didn't lose boxing money or boxing opportunities, and that this is where they were hopefully headed toward parlaying either into professional career or using a boxing Olympic medal to do something with it. I'm not suggesting they didn't lose boxing money. What I said was they still had American freedoms. They could still go someplace and move around in other states and stuff like that. Meanwhile, these Soviet bloc countries, they could win a medal and they still had no rights. They still couldn't leave the country. They still couldn't go anywhere. They still couldn't do anything. I just meant they still had rights as Americans. I didn't mean, and they still had opportunities to make money. I didn't mean that they didn't lose money via boxing. I just meant that you could still. I just meant that Americans do have opportunities that other countries don't have. You said yourself that it's hard to. I mean, how do you say that? Ukraine, Georgia, that those the citizens had any rights? And then if you were Nadia Comaneci, you had no rights the day after the Olympics. You couldn't just be Nadia Comaneci and go where you want, but you could be Joe Schmo anywhere here in America. And if you want to hop in a car and drive halfway across the country, go ahead.
Yeah, if you got the money to afford a car.
Yeah, well, I don't have the money, so I'm not going cross-country any day, but I can certainly, if I want to, if nothing else, walk down the street or take a walk or do something, I don't have money to necessarily buy things.
We may be freer than what Russia is, but we still had, 18, 19-year-old kids that were forced to go fight a Vietnam War because politicians wanted to make money off of it. There was no reason to go to Vietnam. Those kids were forced to go do that. So,
not by 1980, but...
Not 1980, no, but in 1973 they still were. I mean, we didn't come out of Vietnam until 1975. So what I'm telling you is this is a freer country than a communist country.
Right.
It's not free. I mean, come on. If I buy property, I still got to pay property tax on it. So I don't own it. The government owns it. I'm paying rent to the government. That's
believe me,
I'm not. This country was supposed to be.
I'm not suggesting, because I had watched these boxing bouts, that I didn't feel bad for these boxers. And then forget just the boxers themselves. There's all these athletes, the decathlon or obscure sports, where you can use it to get a teaching position. You may not get an endorsement or something, but you can get a bronze medal and some swimming thing, and you can teach. You get a job at a high school teaching swimming just because of that.
In 1976, I mean, Bruce Jenner was all over the place because he won the decathlon. I mean, you might have had a guy that was a decathlete in 1980 that may have been able to do that, and that was completely taken from him. His ability to earn a living was taken away from him. See, I think this is...
I'm not suggesting I don't feel bad for the athletes.
This is what I don't think you get. In the end, that war went on for another 9 years, so it had no bearing on that war. Our goal was not to hurt them because they couldn't have the Olympics. Our goal was to force them to stop that war because Carter gave them, and this is the thing that killed Carter, is he gave them 1 month to get out, and that wasn't going to happen. He didn't negotiate with them to try to make things better. He gave them an ultimatum because of Brzezinski.
Carter got killed. Carter got killed by the Iranian hostage situation.
Well, that was in 1979. He was already... Yeah, but see, that's the thing.
They were still being held hostage when he was defeated in the election.
Yeah,
they were still held hostage.
That's when they let him out.
People were frustrated. Yeah. No, they let him out on Reagan's first day.
January of 81.
And that's what killed his election purposes. Though, I will say, the boycott might be one more thing. Jimmy Carter was a real unpopular president. There's no doubt about it. He probably did do wonderful things, put a lot more females in as federal judges, did a lot for civil rights. But nonetheless, he was a very unpopular guy, and this is a decision that also was probably more unpopular than popular with the American public. And I understand that. I don't remember I was probably kind of bummed like everybody else. I can't say if you gave me a choice, should we send our athletes or should we not send our athletes? I'd say send our athletes, But then again, I'm a kid, so I don't know if I'm looking at the right perspective. But as an adult looking back on it, I still maybe agree with you. I'm not sure this is the right way to do it, almost as if what Italy and England is saying. But nonetheless, I thought it was a principled decision. I disagree with you that he was doing this for some other way, and even though it was bipartisan, he ran it through both he ran it through both the House and the Senate. It was overwhelmingly approved, and he did it. Is there probably a better way of dealing with it? I think probably England and Italy are right. There's probably a better way to do with it, and it's to great credit to West Germany and South Korea and Canada. They stuck with, they could have sent their athletes too. They could have said, look, our alliance isn't hurt, but we're going to send our athletes. But they didn't. They made their decisions too.
Yeah, they failed their people too, the way our president failed ours. Because the only thing in the end that it hindered was our athletes making money. Come on, without the 1976 Olympics, nobody even cares that Bruce Jenner wants to be a woman.
Well, that's probably true, but also Bruce Jenner was a very special decathlon athlete that not too many people who even wanted decathlon become as famous as him. There's a certain charisma or what have you, and Bruce Jenner had it. He was a star.
Yeah, it was because he was an American and he
won
the decathlon, and
absolutely,
and they usually didn't win.
And if there had been a boycott in 1976 and Bruce Jenner had not been able to participate in the Olympics, you're right, he would not be famous today. I don't know whether he'd be a woman or a man. I have no idea, but he would not be famous today.
He never would have got to marry a Kardashian.
Lucky him. Just for that, he probably wishes there was a boycott.
No, he doesn't, because he's made all kind of bank off of that. But when you look at it, that's my point. I mean, in the end, everything was going to turn out the way it turned out anyways. So when all's said and done, the only thing that was hurt were the people on those Olympic teams for the United States, Canada, and whoever else boycotted. The only thing,
and you would agree then also all the Soviet-controlled countries in '84 whose athletes were forced to boycott, though how well they could parlay a victory and do something with it like an American could isn't the same.
And they could do that in communist Russia, because if you won a gold medal,
you're right. You're right. If you won the gold, you definitely were going to get a little bit special treatment for sure.
But see, this is the thing. I don't really give a shit what happens to Russians in 1984. They were our enemy. I don't care.
Well, what about Georgia? What about Ukraine? What about Romania? What about Poland?
I don't care.
Well, that's not a very nice attitude.
I don't care. Because
you don't care. Well, they're human beings, and they're being held prisoner.
They're human beings. They're being held prisoner. You know what? Don't be
held
prisoner anymore. Fight.
Well, I thank God Reagan cared and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Reagan didn't care.
He cared.
No, he did. It just made him look good. I mean, if you think...
No, he cared. Reagan was a passionate guy about it. He hated communism.
Yeah.
He hated it with a passion. He hated it when he was in the Actors
Guild. And see, the
thing
is this. I bet he didn't give a shit what happened to the 84 Russian Olympians that didn't get to go either. They were our enemy.
Oh, no, he probably didn't. I don't see him losing a lot of sleep because the Soviet Union didn't show up. And I told you, Americans didn't care.
And I don't want those people to be held hostage and everything, but I don't want Americans held the way they are either. Because I
don't think Americans are held hostage.
They're not?
I think that you're part of a government situation, and you're part of a nation, and your leaders made a decision, and I don't think it's the same thing.
That.
None of them are put in jail.
Leaders? I don't get a chance to choose my leader.
Well, yes, you did.
No, I don't.
You got a chance to vote Jimmy Carter into office, and you got a choice to vote him out of office.
What if I
and that's what Americans did.
No, wait a second. This is
well, we didn't because I was too little.
No, I didn't have a choice with Trump and Clinton. What I had was this. I had a bunch of rich people sit back in the Republican and Democratic Party. They select for me who I get to choose from. How's that a democracy?
No, the Democrats did that, not the Republicans. Because the Republicans did not want Trump to win the nomination, but he clearly took the party hostage. The Democrats have these super delegates. They put Hillary Clinton at a big lead, and it was going to be very difficult for anyone to have in a fair, square democracy.
My point is this, Chris. The only people that can be president in this country are people that are rich.
That's probably true.
It's not probably true, because you can't name me somebody that's not rich that has been president. So
I take it word the word probably. You have to be wealthy to win the presidential election.
To be. Yeah. So how does that give me a choice? I don't have a choice. I get to choose between a couple rich people that have been put there for me. I mean, the Republican Party, is a joke just like the Democrats because it's all the same party.
Well, it's not. Donald Trump's a loose gun on his own. I don't think he's really a Republican. I don't think
he's a Democrat.
He jumps back and forth.
No, he was a Democrat for his whole life.
That's what I mean. He's a Democrat, he's a Republican, he's a Democrat, and he's a Republican now.
No, he was just a Democrat until he became a Republican to run for president. I mean, he was for abortion. He was against guns, and this was just at the beginning of the 2000s.
Well, at least nothing else, because I think we're going to drift too far off base. But Reagan was a Democrat who jumped to Republican, but he did it off purely principles. He did not do it for what was in his best interest at the moment, and switched positions every moment.
Well, my point is, we do not live in a free
country. And Carter, I don't think, jumped around. Yeah, you know what? I guess Carter was the kind of person that, like everybody else, he made campaign promises, and it turns out he couldn't keep them. So in that sense, he's a politician. But I do think he's proven, even post-president, see that he has his own mind, he has his own set of principles, and quite frankly, a lot of people think he's a well-meaning, kooky guy. He's a well-meaning guy who's not that smart. That's what a lot of people view him as. But nonetheless, I think it was a principled decision. You don't believe it was a principled decision. And he did run it through due process. He ran it through both parties and both houses.
Well, they also ran it through NATO, the United Nations, and Bilderberger. So that's who makes the decisions. It had nothing to do with our Congress or our Senate or anything else. It's what Brzezinski wanted. It's what they did. I mean, nobody cared about the athletes. The boxers got fucked in the end. And, you got a lot of boxers now that are down and out having trouble that if they would have turned pro in 1978, maybe, everything would have turned out different. Or if you have the Olympics and Johnny Bumpus wins a gold medal, which I think there was a good chance he does, or a Donald Curry, maybe everything turns out different. So in the end, this is my point. It was a bad idea because at the end of the day, we didn't affect the war in Afghanistan with that, but we did affect a lot of Olympians that could have made a much better living and a much better life off of that.
Yeah, assuming that you're right, they just all win gold medals, and there's no guarantee of that either.
What I'm saying is this: you're going to have a few of them, but
this boxing team. Yeah, we'll go through that in a little bit, but I agree that this boxing team would have been stout enough even after a tragedy, which we'll get to. But even after that, we were probably strong enough to win, I would say, probably somewhere along the line of 3 or 4 gold medals. I don't know. There's no way of knowing exactly, but it was certainly not a weak team that would have been put out there.
Yeah, so there would have
been. And the majority of Americans agree with you that Carter shouldn't have done it. I mean, the majority of Americans agree with you. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. All I'm saying is I thought it was a principled decision.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is. The only thing in the end that matters is it right or wrong. I don't give a shit what your reason is for doing it. If you're wrong, you're wrong, and it doesn't really matter what your principles are.
I don't think life's quite that black and white.
I do. I think you're either right or wrong. You either win or you lose. You're either alive or you're dead.
I know you believe that, but I just don't.
Well, then you're wrong, but that's all right. It's all right to be wrong sometimes. I'm just busting.
Thank you.
Balls. All right. Okay, next up, we're going to go to the other thing you alluded to. That was the plane crash. There were dual meets that were held in Krakow and Katowice. I don't even know how to say that, but I'm not Polish, so it's all right that I don't. Poland, on March 14th, 1980. The plane en route was a Soviet-built Polish airliner. Went down half a mile from Warsaw's Okęcie Airport. There had been problems with the landing gear on the first approach. On the second attempt, the pilots used a special procedure to account for the faulty landing gear. However, the additional thrust used in the procedure caused one of the plane's engines to break apart, which in turn severed the rudder and elevator control lines, which was needed to control the direction and altitude of the plane. The disaster took 77 passengers, 10 crew members, was the worst air crash in Polish history. And there were 14 boxers, 8 officials on the plane, and there was a lot of talented guys on here. And I know I've talked to numerous guys that, I think it was Alex Ramos who was on the show, who was supposed to be on the plane, and he ended up winning a semifinal fight, I think in Madison Square Garden. So he was going to the finals against Mike McCallum and wouldn't be able to fight or wouldn't be able to get on that plane to go to it. So he missed the plane, and there was like 7 or 8 guys. I know Robert Hines, who was a really good pro, also had that happen. But this was a team that, there's some guys here that really could have done something in the Olympics. But more importantly, it was just a tragic loss because most of these guys are between the ages of 17 and 21.
Yeah, it's a really horrible story. It's even worse because of the ironies of that killed these 14 boxers and 8 coaches, including Sarge Johnson, who was the assistant coach for the '76 team. Um, it may not even been faulty landing gear. It was a Soviet-made shit plane, and it's possible the light just simply said the landing gear wasn't working, and it's possible that for just a cheap light that didn't work, this would have landed safely. There's no way of absolutely knowing, but apparently the pilot was a hero. That when this thing took a nosedive, when the explosion of the engines went off, and there was a very famous Polish actress and on board, and an American astronomer was well respected on board. It took 26 seconds. It started diving straight into a juvenile detention center, and he managed to maneuver the plane into a moss. And then the explosion was so bad, it took more than a day to reach the bodies, and then I've seen the severed bodies and stuff like that. So the families never even got to see their kin again. It was all just mostly thrown into a mass grave. And I guess the main boxer as far as attention of was Lemuel Steeples, because the New York Times put an article on the Big Six, so the American boxers that were going to compete in '80, and he was one of them. I guess he defeated Milt McCrory in the light welterweight division. Anyway, he was projected to possibly win the gold,
Yeah,
and he was
also,
killed. And
real quick, just in case you didn't catch it,
sure.
he was the gold medalist at the Pan Am Games in '79 and beat the
Exactly.
Cuban. Yeah.
And that's what the New York Times called the Big Six. We had 4 gold and 2 silver. The 4 gold were Jackie Beard, Bernard Taylor, Lemuel Steeples, and Tony Tucker, and the silvers were Richie Sandoval and James Schuler. So it's a terrible tragedy, and I guess it's so this whole thing is sort of a sad topic. I told you I had a little bit of troubles doing this because it's so sad what happened to all these people. And believe me, I won't go back to the boycott. I feel so bad for these boxers. I mean, I really do. And I don't want to let that down. And this is just one more thing with Carlos Palomino's brother was on that flight and died.
Yeah, Paul Palomino.
Yeah, just a horrible tragedy.
Yeah, and others on the flight, because this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, was to just bring these names up again because they've kind of been lost over the years. Also on the flight were Andre McCoy. He was 20 years old from New Bedford, Massachusetts. Chuck Robinson of Port Angeles, Washington. And of course, as you said, Paul Palomino, who was the brother of the great welterweight champion who's been on our show a couple times, Carlos Palomino. And a lot of people, and I didn't ask this because I didn't want to ask it, but Carlos retired right after that happened, and he was only 29 years old in 1979. So I've always wondered if maybe that was one of the factors for him not fighting on. Also, you had Calvin Anderson, who was also a very good fighter. Walter Harris from San Francisco, Byron Lindsay, Byron Payton, George Pimentel, David Rodriguez, Jerome Stewart, U.S. Army Sergeant Elliot Chavis, U.S. Army and a member of the U.S. Amateur Boxing Team head coach Tom Sarge Johnson, who was a great boxing coach. I know when I've talked to some of these guys that fought around that time amateur-wise, they all loved him. He was also a coach on that legendary 1976 team. But yeah, I mean, it's a shame that these guys get forgotten because there was a lot of guys here that, not even considering how talented they were boxers, just how young they were.
Yeah, exactly. Steeples himself is a little older. He's like 23, 24, but I think Carlos Palomino's brother was like 18 or something.
Yeah.
It's just a horrible tragedy, and I guess it's because it's this, it somehow turned into this heroic event for the pilot for what he did. There is sort of a shrine or something that lasts almost a block long for the families that ever want to go there. And it is sad that you can't bring your families back because you can't identify the bodies.
Yeah. And when we look at the 1980 Olympic team, you start off at 106 pounds. You had a guy that was actually, when we compared to 76 and the 84 team, he was on the 80 team also, Robert Shannon. Didn't really have a great pro career, but as we said, he made 2 Olympic teams. Robert Shannon was a good fighter. I think also the thing that stood out to me is you would think with the Olympic Games in Russia that the Soviets would get all the decisions, but I think the only Soviet who win a gold medal was at Shannon's weight.
Yeah, well, I will say this about, at least Shannon did get the opportunity to fight in the '84 Olympics, but that's also because he was 17 in the '80s,
Yeah.
so he could afford to maybe wait 4 more years and even be in his prime. And I did watch the fight that he lost in the '84 Olympics against Sung Kil Moon of South Korea, and he was dominated and knocked down a couple times, and it was good victory for the South Korean. And the reason I want to mention that is South Korea was one of the teams that went along with the boycott. So when you do look at the '80 Olympic gold winners and what would have happened if America competed, I think you also have to remember South Korea, of all the teams that boycotted, would have been, I think, the other force that would have maybe mixed into those medals.
Especially between 106 and 132 pounds.
Yeah, because they seem to do really well, both North and South Korea, from '76 to '88. So there's no reason why they wouldn't do well in '80, I would think.
Yeah. Now, a guy that I do think would have won gold was Richie Sandoval, who was the WBA bantamweight champion, upset Jeff Chandler, which was a huge thing at the time because Chandler was running through everybody. But Sandoval's a guy that I think was kind of robbed because I think he's a guy that could have been a star coming out of those Olympics.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure Sandoval would be he is listed as one of the big six by the New York Times, and his fight with Chandler is an interesting one. At least he did win the title, and it's an interesting fight because first it's kind of a boring fight with left jabs for the first 8 rounds, and Chandler's the champion. I sort of wondered, geez, Sandoval, it's good you're being patient, but are you being too patient? But Chandler kind of self-defeated himself because he kept complaining, kept looking at the referee. He's sort of not in his own head. And then Sandoval finally sort of got aggressive around the 11th round and started dominating it, and then took no chances with the judges and scored a technical knockout in the 15th round. So good for him. Like I said, I'm rooting for these boxers, and I'm glad that he took it in his own hands to if he couldn't fight for the gold, and I think there's a good chance he could win it, or at least a silver. Good for him that he did to win the title, legit.
Yeah, then we had Jackie Beard, who fought at 119 pounds. He became the NABF champion. He fought for the WBA title a couple times. Jackie Beard is one of the guys I think may have been a little burnt out from staying until 1980, but I don't think Jackie would have won a gold, but a silver or bronze I don't think would have been out of the question for him.
No, I mean he's a good fighter, and it is very hard to tell when they don't actually face each other.
Yeah.
But again, our athletes can't be punished either for not getting the opportunity, since it wasn't their choice not to go.
Yeah, and then another one who I do think would have won a gold was Bernard Taylor. He was a damn good fighter. Fought to a draw in a WBA title bout. I think didn't he fight Barry McGuigan for the title too?
Yeah, exactly. He fought for the WBA featherweight title, his second opportunity. Well, a couple things I'll just say about Taylor. One, his amateur record that I got listed is 481-8.
Yeah,
even his pro
good.
Record.
Yeah, he's a guy.
Even if he didn't.
He was an amateur too long.
Yeah, even if he didn't win the title, he was 45-4-2. It's a hell of a record. I guess when I watched again the first attempt at winning the title for the WBA was against Pedroza.
Yeah.
I think that's why I was bringing up Sandoval as far as going into that 15th round. Taylor really ran around for most of the 15th round and didn't really engage, and so that's your opportunity. So if it turns into a draw, it gives me more respect for Sandoval, saying, look, this is it, and went in there very aggressive in the 15th round and not taking any chances of it going to the judges.
Yeah, and I think Taylor wins the gold there. Rudy Fink from East Germany won the gold. So I think Taylor was a great amateur. I think he's one of America's greatest amateurs that does really get recognized. At lightweight, Angel Herrera from Cuba won the gold. So Joe Manley was a good fighter, actually won a portion of the light welterweight title for a while. Manley was a solid fighter, but I think Herrera would have probably been a little bit too much for him.
Yeah, of the ones that you said that you think are best chances of winning the gold so far, I think you're right. I would say that Sandoval and Taylor would probably be the two that I think would probably be at the best opportunity. And again, that doesn't mean like someone like Manley. You're still a hell of a fighter. Just not everybody can be the best. Not everybody can win, and that's the tough part about all sports.
Yeah, then at 139 pounds, I think this would have been a great final. You never know. It's a blind draw, so they might have had a fight in the first round. But Patricio Oliva, who I think was a world champion from Italy, and you had Johnny Bump City Bumpus. Bumpus is a guy that I think if he'd have turned pro in 1978, things could have been a little bit different for him. But Bumpus did win the WBA light welterweight championship. Was upset by Gene Mad Dog Hatcher after that. He had a nice win over Marlon Starling in 1986. Been on the show before, but I think Bumpus, I think you're either gold or silver. I think him and Oliva would be a great fight.
Yeah, I don't really know how to rank these things exactly when they don't fight. But again, his amateur record's stupendous. I have it listed at 341 to 16. I mean, but you're right. That's maybe fighting a little too long. But it does say that he doesn't lose very often. That's for sure as an amateur.
But see these guys.
Even as a pro, he had a good record.
Yeah, you see the guys with that many fights. Those are the guys that were told in '78 or asked in '78 to stay around. Now, to me, the most interesting division, and this would have been badass to see, was the welterweight division, where Andreas Adama won the gold medal. I think wasn't that the guy that Sugar Ray Leonard beat in '76?
I can't swear to that.
I'm
really
pretty
don't
sure
remember.
It was, though. But the silver medal was John the Beast Mugabe, and the American that would have been on that team was Donald the Cobra Curry. So I think Curry can win the gold here, but I think he's definitely going to medal. But the competition between those three would have really been nice to see.
Oh, yeah. Again, just since I have it in my hand, you got Curry's record at approximately 404. It's not specific. Apparently, it's a little fudged. But anyway, Curry was just to a certain point in his career as an amateur and a pro, was looking at being one of the greatest in history. And he still turned out with a great career. But yes, there's a certain point where nobody thinks Donald Curry can lose. And as an amateur, he was a great pro, but he was a fantastic amateur as well. This is one of the great ones, and he's probably, I guess, the star of the team. But you're right. I can't imagine him not getting a silver, if not the gold. And I would say it's a good shot, at a gold.
He's the guy when I look at this, and I think this is the dude that would have came out of there with the $1 million or $2 million contract.
Yeah, he's the star. He's the Sugar Ray Leonard who, yeah, because I would say, because even though he doesn't necessarily the most charismatic guy in the ring, he's a great fighter in the ring, but at the same time, everybody's really drawn to him. Everyone's really this pound for pound. He can't be beat. So I guess he has that charisma going for him, and a personable person when he speaks. So yeah, I think he's the guy that would have been the superstar, and he's the one that got affected by $1 million contracts that didn't go his way, though he eventually, certainly earned his respect. And then it still didn't quite turn into, the Sugar Ray Leonard career, but I don't want to put that away from him. It was an amazing career, amateur and pro.
Yeah, but the thing is, if he shortens that amateur career to 1978, turns pro then, you might have a mega fight with Sugar Ray Leonard in 1981.
Oh, that would have been great. I mean, Curry up until that troublemaker Huntington, who took out Curry. He's a real troublemaker, good fighter. But anyway, up until that point, Donald Curry was looking like one of the great ones in history, and he's still a great one. Just
Yeah, and see, the thing I noticed with like Sandoval, Bumpus, Curry, those are guys that when you bring up the record, it's like 300 or 400 and something. And those were guys that after they won the title, it seemed like their career was over shortly after.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying, that Curry might have lost an opportunity to fight, a Hearns or Leonard at the right time. That would have been another kind of, or Hagler, or somebody, those range. But again, he still had a great career, and there's a lot of talk that he was Sugar Ray Robinson, and that's tough talk, And then he seemed to have a problem when he faced Huntington. Milton McClure destroyed in 2 rounds. McClure is a great boxer, undefeated. And then Curry seemed to have a problem. He was tiring out, kind of fairly quick at somewhere around the 5th or 6th round mark, and never seemed to correct it. He said he was trying to make weight, and that was the major problem. So he was dieting too hard right before fights. I don't know if that's true or not, but that seemed to be what he was saying.
All right, then at light middleweight, you had Armando Martinez from Cuba. The American that would have been on the 80 team if they would have had one was James Black Gold Schuler. Schuler had a solid pro career. of course, tragically died early. I think he died right after the first round knockout loss to Thomas Hearns. I think Schuler's a guy that would have had a shot to do something here in metal. What's your take on Schuler?
Well, he's definitely a great amateur, fighter. Two-time national Golden Gloves. That's light middleweight division. Certainly a great amateur. And then as a pro, he ran up a string of victories as such. It's just unfortunately sometimes it's like with Michael Spinks and Mike Tyson, where you get caught up in one fight, in one round, and unfortunately for Schuler, that one round against Thomas Hearns, when Hearns had taken a couple losses, and Hearns just destroyed him in a minute, and then poor Schuler went out and purchased a motorcycle, and within an hour of purchasing that motorcycle, got hit by a tractor trailer that was in the wrong. Yeah, hit him. He didn't do anything wrong and was dead. And just like that, Schuler's kind of off the map. Even though, again, he had a great amateur. I think I have his record here at 178 wins and 6 losses. So that's somebody, again, you can't just say, hey, they're not gonna medal. Yeah, there's a real good chance somebody like that will medal. But unfortunately, I can't forget his last fight against Hearns, because that's the most high-profile fight he had.
Yeah, the middleweight Jose Gomez from Cuba won the gold medal. The United States representative was Charles Carter. What's your take on Carter?
Let me see. Charles Carter. Carter's a character. When I was going through these guys, he's a great athlete, but he's a quirky guy. So he's one of the, there's certain kind of athletes that go their own way. He's a guy that goes his own way. He doesn't really necessarily train like he should, but he's a guy that is just naturally good at sports. So one of the quirky things beyond his amateur career was when he turned pro, he suddenly showed up at this in Washington State College and said, I want to play on the basketball team. And they put him on the basketball team, and he became a star there. Nobody knew he was a boxer, a pro boxer, or that he was was on the Olympic team. Nobody had any idea. He became the top scorer. Well, he was scoring under 18 points. He was apparently the top player of these 27 schools. And then he says, I got to quit so I can fight Michael Nunn, who was undefeated at the time. And then he got TKO'd. So Carter's just a quirky guy who's an amazing athlete if he could focus on something. So I guess the problem with his boxing career, what he's going to do is he focused or not? So he's just a great athlete, but a great athlete who sort of, again, it works on wins and stuff like that. But apparently, from just little things I've read, he stayed in contact with the team, so he stayed in the Washington area. So apparently, he's a nice guy. He's just he's not the most dedicated athlete, sticking to one thing.
Oh, we need to have him on the show. He's still
around. Oh, he'd be a real blast. I would guarantee. I'd love to hear that one myself.
What to find?
A character.
All right, another one with a great amateur record was Leroy Murphy. Murphy, I think, is an amateur. From what I saw, was like 157 and 17.
Yeah, I had that too.
Yeah, I mean, Slobodan Kakar. I know I'm not saying the right last name wrong, but I know he was from Yugoslavia, and I think that he won a portion of the cruiserweight title at some point.
Well, it depends how you define it, because it's the IBF, and I know sometimes you like certain titles and don't like other titles.
I said
but
a
that's
portion of a
technically
title.
what it's listed.
I didn't
yeah,
say
right.
he was
Okay.
a champion.
All right. Okay.
So I'll give him a portion of a title. The thing that struck out that I really remembered about Leroy Murphy, you ever see his fight with Shishanda Muti?
That is one of the greatest fights in history. I would recommend anybody listening to this, judge for yourself, and don't just go to the highlights. Watch the entire fight.
This is my question.
A classic.
Was that not? I'm doing this off of memory because I got a video of this fight from somebody, and I watched it like years ago. But wasn't that the fight with the double knockdown where they dropped each other at the same time?
Yes, I'll just say that Moody seemingly dominates it really for most of the fight, and then knocks down Murphy in the 9th round, and then Murphy comes back to knock down Moody in the 11th round, and then in the 12th round they're both battered and tired. They're both just dead tired, and then yes, it looks like a mutual knockdown, but it really isn't. What happens is Moody throws the knockout punch, and Murphy doesn't quite go down, and then the exhaustion after he throws the knockout punch, he kind of moves and clings onto Murphy, and they both fall to the ground. And it's ruled a mutual knockdown, and so the referee's counting. It looks like the Rocky II movie, almost like this is real life. They're both on the ground. They're both going to get knocked out. And though Moody threw the punch, and then Murphy manages to get back up to his feet, just like Rocky Balboa, and Moody is counted out. I mean, it is one of the most dramatic-looking endings to a fight I've ever seen, and I recommend everybody watch it. And I think it's funner to watch the entire fight, and not just the final round.
All right, finally at heavyweight, Teofimo Stevenson, of course, won the gold medal from Cuba. James Broad was the American who was in that. I don't think there was much hope for Broad to beat Stevenson.
No, and he has, we're talking these guys that have hundreds of fights. I think he only had 36 amateur fights. I got him listed at 33-3 from the Army. So he didn't have nearly as much experience as a lot of these guys as an amateur. And then as a pro, he's sort of an interesting couple of fights. His fight, he was in his third fight. He's 2-0. He takes on James Bone Crusher Smith, and Smith's first fight. Now, Broad comes into the fight at about 235 pounds, and Smith says, they ask him, "Are you afraid of Beard?" And he goes, "No, nobody's ever knocked me down. Nobody's ever hurt me." Now, to give credit, Broad did land about 3 or 4 low blows, but by the fourth round, Broad lands a body punch on Smith, and Bone Crusher Smith is knocked out. So that's probably the most impressive victory of his career. And then while he was still undefeated, he faced an undefeated Marvis Frazier, which I know Marvis Frazier versus James Broad doesn't sound like anybody really wants to watch that. It is a really fun fight. These two heavyweights.
It was shown on CBS, I think.
Yeah, a lot of energy. I mean, a lot of energy for two heavyweights. And then when Broad finally faced Tim Witherspoon, all of a sudden he's ballooned to 261 pounds. He makes Tim Witherspoon look like a small guy, and Tim Witherspoon's like 6'3" and like 240 or something, and he looks small compared to Broad. But anyway, Witherspoon wiped him out.
I
Knocked him out
remember
in 2
the
rounds.
Witherspoon fight that was on the undercard, I think, of Page and Tubbs for the title, and that may have been the 4 most out of shape heavyweights in history to be on the same card.
And Broad eventually fought Page, knocked him down, but lost the fight. And then
Tony Tucker too, and actually took Tucker to distance. And that Page fight was a majority decision. It wasn't like he got blown out. He also lost the unanimous decision to Damiani, and I think those 3 fights were in a row. I don't know which order it was, but I'm pretty sure, like in 1987, he fought those 3 in a row. And then his career was pretty much done after that, because I remember he went and fought the white dude in South Africa. What was his name? Johnny Duploy. And he got knocked out there. Then Razor Ruddock knocked him out. He was pretty much done from there. But he's one of those 80s heavyweights like Tony Tubbs, Greg Page, that if they could have just stayed in shape, they could have done something. And I remember his nickname was Broadaxe, but I thought it should have been Broadass.
That's funny. No, somebody must have told you that joke before. That's a
funny
joke.
No, it was. I remember watching him.
But you're right. That's a funny joke.
The first time I saw him, I saw him fight Frazier on TV, and then the next time I saw him fight was against Witherspoon, because I was all excited because Tony Tubbs was from Cincinnati and he was fighting for a portion of the title. And I thought when they were talking about him during the fight and they were saying James Broadaxe Broad, I actually thought they were saying Broadass.
Oh, well, it's a little bit like when Buster Douglas fought Mike Tyson, and the next time you see him, he's looking like an elephant fighting Vander Holyfield. So, yeah, at least he lost. Most of his early fights that he lost were to good fighters, so it's not like he lost to chumps, but clearly he wasn't in shape. Apparently, he was a favorite sparring partner of Mike Tyson when Mike Tyson's undefeated. Took a lot of shots in sparring practice, and whatever happened, he suffered enough brain damage that he was banned from fighting in California and Nevada. Tried to fight anyway, managed to find ways to fight, and anyway, next thing you know, he's homeless and dead at 43, which is probably a way to end this. One of the things that I've just amazed at all the sadness.
That's not the way to end anything. Dead at 43.
Yeah, but it was so much tragedy. So much tragedy amongst this team, and I feel really, really bad for him.
And it was all Jimmy Carter's fault.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yep.
I don't know what Jimmy Carter had to do with Broad being in shape.
I think he had a lot to do with it, because I think he used to go down and give him IVs with peanuts to fatten him up.
Oh, okay, there you go. I won't disagree.
But all right, Chris, we will be back on Monday. What's our topic? I don't even remember.
I'd like to do Max.
Sonny Liston. Don't say Sonny Liston.
I was going to say Max Baer, but I don't think you like that either. Well, you like the Razor Ruddock coming more.
I'm fine with Max Baer. I'm good.
Oh, you
want
to do Max Baer?
Yeah, Sonny Liston is kind of like beating a dead horse, and there's so much stuff that we don't know. I mean, almost everything with Sonny Liston, especially the last 10 years of his life, is just a guess and a conjecture because nobody really knows.
Well, at least with Max Baer, we both agree that you watched the movie and I read the book, and we both agree that he was treated sort of unfairly in this whole Cinderella Man stuff.
Yeah, I still like the movie, though.
Okay. I can't say I like the book.
Oh, my God. You like the Hands of Stone Roberto Duran thing. Did you see Cinderella Man?
The movie, I watched only part of it. I didn't really watch all of it, so I can't judge it. But also, Hands of Stone had Robert De Niro in it, and De Niro gave a decent performance as Ray Arcel.
That was in the Duran movie. That movie was terrible. It's not as bad as Fat City, though. But
that's a great movie. I don't care what. You and John can pick on me all you want. That's a great movie.
John Raspani called me the other day because we got the Zoots boxing talk. And Anthony George does a show, and they had like 3 or 4 guys on, including him, to talk about that fight or talk about their favorite boxing movies. And he's like, "You're not going to believe it." He said, "But both of those guys had Fat City at number 2."
I thought it was a great film. I still don't understand why you hate it so much.
It's horrible.
But
it's
anyway,
just a bunch of broke people who wanted to talk about what they wish they would have done instead of actually doing something.
But I will say this, just because, like with all these other things, Max Baer, I plan on going through his fights, and if it turns out, I don't find anything on his personality. It'll be interesting to see what the conclusion is. You know, you never know until you go through all these things again. You know, memories plays tricks on us.
Yeah, I mean, just off the top of my head, I believe he was damn good until after the Braddock loss for some reason. And wasn't there some rumor that, well, of course, in the movie...
Yeah, he did. Once he started losing, he lost a lot.
But yeah, once he started losing, it just kind of went downhill.
Yeah. Well, it'll be nice to go over his career a little bit and just see if that's what happened. And did he really lose that fight against Braddock? Because I never really sit through all 15 rounds and judge it quite that carefully.
I can tell you this. The other thing where the movie was way off is that was not an exciting fight. And I watched it probably about the time the fight came out, or the movie came out, just to kind of compare it. And I thought Braddock beat him pretty easy because Baer didn't throw that many punches. But it will be interesting to watch it again to see if I think the same thing I thought 8 or 9 years ago.
Well, I look forward to it. This is a tough topic, so I'm glad you really pushed hard to get it through.
Which one?
The 80 Olympic team. I mean, I almost have to have a mental breakdown. It was so much tragedy and sadness and boxers to go through, but you really pushed, and I'm glad you did. It was hard, but I'm glad we did it.
Well, this is the thing. It's a story that you never hear discussed.
Right.
You know, it's just like Max Baer is something you very rarely hear discussed. Sonny Liston, you hear discussed a lot. And, I mean, if you look at the listeners, which I want to thank everybody for listening, especially where we compared to 76 and 84 Olympic boxing teams, I mean, there's a few thousand people that listen to those. And I think our goal on this show, on the old-time boxing show, whether it's going back to 1900 or 1980, is to give people something they don't normally hear.
Right, I agree, and then I always appreciate everyone that listens to us and gives us faith that we're trying our best. So it means a lot.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I want to remind everybody that 10 o'clock tonight, live Eastern Time, 10 o'clock, myself and former Indiana basketball legend, played on the 1981 Indiana Hoosiers National Championship team, Steve Risley, will be on with our Sweet 16 show, our preview show, starting for all tomorrow night's games. If you want to bet those games, you can go to mybookie.ag. You can go to gruelingtruth.net, click on the mybookie.ag banner, which will take you directly there. I think you get a 50 or 100% bonus on whatever you put in there. I also want to tell you guys that yesterday I had the privilege of interviewing former welterweight title contender Randy Shields. It was very interesting, even outside of the boxing, the things he's done after boxing. It was almost a 2-hour interview, but that will be up on the website here in the next day or two, so keep an eye out for that. I want to thank Chris again for doing our show today. I want to thank everybody for listening and remind you that you can go to the iTunes store and find the Grueling Truth app, download that to your iPhone, and you'll be able to get every show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network, and there's literally 60 or 70 a week now, so make sure you do that. You can hear all of our shows on iHeart, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Christopher Shelton, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.